Okay, let's go to Victoria Arbiter in London. Victoria, you know, I remember you telling us, I think last year, many of you have been carrying around a black dress for many, many years, unfortunately. This is not unexpected. She was a 96-year-old woman, but people are shocked today still.
They are shocked. Good memory, Nat. But yes, for years, given the Queen's age, certainly given Prince Philip's age, I had been travelling with my notebook and a black dress, and I became very superstitious. If I didn't travel with my black dress, would something terrible happen? So no, it's not a shock when you consider her age. Prince Philip, of course, was 99 when he passed. The Queen is 96. But I think simply because she's always been there, serving as a backdrop to pretty much everyone who's alive today's life, we were perhaps all rather guilty of assuming she would just always be there. You could pretty much tell the date and time of the year based on where the Queen was. Her schedule was regimented and inflexible. She attended all the annual set pieces, whether it was Trooping the Colour or the Remembrance Day commemorations in November. We just became accustomed to the Queen's presence. In times of national crisis, people would gravitate to Buckingham Palace. In times of national joy, people would gravitate to Buckingham Palace. She was able to provide a tremendous sense of continuity and stability and a focus for national unity. And one of Hugh's pieces a little bit earlier that you showed, I have to confess, I got goosebumps just seeing her COVID address to the nation once again when she finished by saying, "We'll meet again." And that message feels even more poignant today as people kind of try to come to terms with this loss.
Yeah, Victoria, you cover the royal family for American media. The relationship between America and the Queen, how is she seen?
They adore her here. It's remarkable, actually, that she's able to command such admiration and such respect from a country that has no affiliation with the Commonwealth, certainly not a Commonwealth realm. And you think about Americans, they fought a hard-won war to rid themselves of British rule and to seek independence. And yet the Americans, generally speaking, certainly not everybody, but they love the royal family. And in particular, they love the Queen. There is great affection for the Queen here. Back in 1951, when she made her very first trip stateside, she was still Princess Elizabeth then, but President Truman at the time gave federal employees the day off because it was such a national day of celebration to welcome her here. Later, when she returned in 1959, a congressman said to President Eisenhower, "We have all fallen in love with the Queen," and here we are so many years later, and that is still the sentiment. Just a short time ago, the Empire State Building announced that it would be lit up tonight in purple in recognition of the Queen and her reign and as a sense of respect and as a tribute to the Queen's long reign. So I think Americans are feeling this as well. It's not often that they give way to rolling news coverage, but certainly all the news stations, this is all they are talking about on cable and on network television. And I think Americans are feeling this loss as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it, Victoria? And the flags at half-staff in the United States today, explain that, their significance.
Yeah, well, again, the Queen is not the Queen of America. So this is quite an unprecedented tribute from President Biden to order that the flags be dropped to half-mast. But I think it speaks to the level of respect that Americans have for the Queen. And actually, in the wake of 9/11, at the changing of the guard, the soldiers played the national anthem, the US national anthem, in the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. The flag over Buckingham Palace was lowered in remembrance to those who lost their lives on 9/11. And I think this is America's way of paying tribute back to the Queen. President Biden was very fortunate to meet the Queen last summer. He enjoyed his meeting with her tremendously, as did every US president who met with her. She met almost all of them. There was just one, LBJ, that she wasn't able to meet. And I think the fact that they are dropping the flags really does speak to the Queen's remarkable ability to appeal to people of every race, nationality, creed, religion. It didn't matter where people were from. They admired her and they respected her. And I certainly can't think of another person on this planet that was able to appeal to people from so many different backgrounds. She really was unique in that respect.
Yeah, and Victoria, somebody who was under such close scrutiny, particularly over the last few years with social media and the like, you've just reminded us that in big moments, she was special, wasn't she? She nailed it and made friends around the globe as a result of it. She was classy.
She really was. Classy, what a great word. I think that's such a perfect word that it really epitomizes her. It didn't matter who they were. It was interesting. You would see kind of captains of industry and world leaders come slightly undone in her presence. There was this rather diminutive 5'4" figure, but everyone sort of melted in her presence and would lose the power of speech. And I'm talking about some of the world's greatest orators here. And I think it's just because they respected her so much, they admired her so much, and they recognized that she had been through everything. She had witnessed everything. And at the end of the day, she was the CEO of Windsor PLC. And when any other firm comes in, sort of deals with trouble and scandal, the CEO usually has to step down. And yet with the Queen, people just fell in love with her more. And I think it was because of her incredible ability to step back, recognize what was happening, listen to everybody's gripes, and then respond. She didn't have an emotional reaction to situations, and it was never about self. She conducted herself with such humility and grace, and she was classy, as you say. And I think because she didn't respond with emotion, she didn't have a dramatic pushback, that made people respond in kind. And I think she made everyone around her a better person.
It was never about self. Wow, that really says something contrary to the modern world, doesn't it? You know, it's just completely the antithesis of how we live now. What she must have thought of how we live our lives today. But of course, she didn't do interviews, did she, Vicky?
No, she didn't. I mean, it'll be years from now before historians are granted access to her private diaries. Sadly, I think it'll be long after our time that we'll really have an understanding of her personal political leanings and preferences. But as you say, what must she have thought with everything she witnessed and the hardship she saw people go through during the war? And today is so much about self, whether it's selfies or self-promotion or social media, where everything's about people living their own best lives. And yet for her, it was, how can I make other people's lives better? How can I recognize leaders in their communities, people? How can I reward them for their own achievement, their own sense of success? What can I do to make other people's lives better? It was never about self. And I think that comes from her generation, the wartime generation. Some may argue with me, but I think they still represent the greatest generation. They gave the biggest sacrifices of any other generation. They went through so much so that we today can enjoy the lives that we are blessed to lead. And I think the Queen epitomized that right until the very end. The fact that she was working all but 2 days ago just goes to show how remarkable she was and how fortunate we are to have witnessed her reign.
Victoria, your view on King Charles III. We had a wonderful quote from just an ordinary Aussie in Adelaide walking along the Torrens, was asked, what do you think of King Charles? And he said, look, just give him a go.
I couldn't have put it better. That is very much my sentiment. And I'm so glad to hear that was the take of somebody just on the street, because I do hope people will give him a chance. I can't imagine what it's like for Prince Charles in these hours at the moment. He's having to reconcile the private grief he's experiencing over the loss of his mother, along with suddenly assuming the job for which he's been preparing his entire life. He is the longest serving heir apparent, but he's also a very forward-thinking man. I think it's very quick. People are very quick to criticize Prince Charles for errors of the past, sins of the past. People's love of Diana tends to cloud their judgment of Prince Charles today. It was 40 years ago that he was preaching about the dangers of plastics. It was 40 years ago that he was urging people to embrace religious tolerance. He set up the Prince's Trust over 40 years ago that has helped so many young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get a good start in life. People have said that they would have ended up in prison, on drugs, down and out if it wasn't for organizations like the Prince's Trust. He invested in the youth, recognizing that they were the future of tomorrow. And so I hope that sympathy over the loss of the Queen does give way to support for Prince Charles, because I think he has a lot to offer, albeit over a relatively short amount of time.
Yep, he was the original greenie, and I remember he was seen as a bit of a nutter, wasn't he? That this is back in the 80s and 90s, particularly the 80s, and because you're right. He was one of the original environmentalists.
He faced a lot of criticism. Yes, you're absolutely right. People thought he was absolutely bonkers. They were talking about him talking to plants. So let's see what he's going to bring next.
Exactly.
Victoria,
well, he's
really
ahead of his
appreciate your time.
time in that respect, wasn't he? Victoria, thank you.